Hi, everyone. Michelle Ragusa McBain here, Fail Forward Live podcast. And I'm delighted to have my guest today, Heather Margolis, CEO and founder of not one, but two successful startups, Channel Maven Consulting and Spark Your Channel. She also is the vice chair of the Bapti community, and she is an incredibly dear friend of mine. Heather, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Michelle.
I'm so pleased you're here. So, the purpose of our show today is really to talk about amazingly successful people like you and the lessons that you learned along the way. Because so often we talk about successes, but we don't really get to the heart of the challenges or the stumbling blocks or the growth lessons and what they taught you. And so, my idea and premise of creating this was to really understand people's journey and have a bit of a mentorship for anyone starting out, anyone that wants to be an entrepreneur or learn from any of your lessons. So I appreciate all of your candor and honesty today and always. And so let's get started with our first question. Well, actually, before I do that, for anyone who doesn't know Channel Maven or Spark Your Channel, would you mind giving the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I started my career in the channel actually on the partner side. So I partnered with a very large company and went through all the stumbling blocks of where to get my resources and who was my point person. And then I went to work at EMC, and it was such a great experience for me. I actually came in as a contractor, so I got to do a lot of different things. But felt like a smaller 500 person company was right for me. So I went to a company called Equalogic, and we were acquired by Dell about 6 months later.
Wow.
So I then went to a startup, like 55 people. And when we ran out of funding, and I always knew I wanted to start something, but it was sort of that line in the sand, like, okay, a huge group of people just got laid off. I guess it's time to start a company. So I started Channel Maven Consulting in 2009. We're 12 years old, and Channel Maven Consulting helps companies communicate to their partners and better drive demand with their partners. As part of that, I felt like there was a gap in that sort of through channel marketing automation or through channel sales enablement tool space, that there was really no video, and partners didn't have the ability to just sync it with their marketing automation tools. So that is Spark Your Channel.
I love it. I love it. And so the idea, and I have to give you credit where credit's due, because you're also a mom to two little girls who decided that she would embark upon this mission of starting a second company during a global pandemic while doing it all. So I have to give you a round of applause.
I didn't know about the pandemic before starting it. I might not have done things the way I did.
Everything happens for a reason, I think. And you've been very successful, and I hear nothing but great things from everyone I talk to. So if you don't know Heather, make sure you reach out to her. So my first question is, what was your first job and what did it teach you?
My first job was, I grew up in a small town in Massachusetts, and I worked in the neighborhood hardware store. And I was 13. I think technically it was too young to be working, but the owner, I was in the hardware store with my dad, and I was like facing off all the shelves. I was pulling everything forward, and the owner noticed that and immediately was like, so does she want a summer job? And I just completely immersed myself. I knew my dad was very handy. So I was always around working on cars and doing a lot of different things with my hands. I got to know every product in there. And what would happen, the, sort of stodgy old men would walk in and go, "Where's the guy that works here?" And I would say, "I'm it. What do you need?" And they would try to explain it to me, like so rudimentary. Like I remember this one guy coming in and being like, "Oh, you're not going to be able to help me. I need that thing, that oil that you put in once and then it goes in again." And I was like, 2-in-1 oil, third aisle, halfway down, bottom shelf. And that was like my experience with all, and I got known as Heather, the hardware store girl. So that was my first job. It taught me confidence. It taught me that women and men can do anything they put their mind to. And I sort of it was such a confidence booster to have, like, another customer over just sort of snickering when I would, show the old guy where everything was.
I love it. So you were always interested in shining in male-dominated fields, it sounds like.
Yes, and that has followed my career. I then went into finance. I worked at an auto body shop when I was in high school too, and that was a big one.
That's amazing. So there you are, you progress, you've done all these like great first-time jobs, and then you get to be around 21. So looking back at your career, you've gone through all of these acquisitions and consulting and startups and SaaS startups and angel investment and all of these different paths. What advice would you go back to your 21-year-old self and guide you on this journey that you're about to embark on?
I would probably tell my 21-year-old self, I always followed the money. I was on my own at a very early age. So I always was sort of like, there's this job over here, or there's this job that's not as great, but it's more money.
Mm,
And I was supporting myself. So I had to follow the money. I would tell people to follow their passion or the job that seemed more interesting if they can. Like, I wasn't in a place where I could do that, but I would certainly, I would give anyone that advice if they could.
I love that. I love that. Now, you've been very successful. We know that.
Thanks.
But what was your biggest failure and what did it teach you? Personally, professionally, doesn't matter.
I would say earlier in Channel Maven's history, I was not a good manager. Or leader, I should say. There's a lot of stress that comes with, I've always been the breadwinner in my family. My husband's also an entrepreneur. That's what happens when you meet at the number one entrepreneur school in business school in the country, is you both start companies. I was always the one who had to earn the money. And I think not had to, but like that came from me having been on my own so early in life
Right,
that I couldn't just like, hey, let's wing it.
right.
And my husband really followed a passion. I mean, he makes chocolate now, but this is his
Oh,
fourth company.
you
Um,
ship to Florida by any
yes,
chance?
I can with dry ice so it doesn't melt. Um, and I guess I always felt a level of stress around how much money we were making. And I think there were times where I could have led people better and cared more about the general health of the company instead of like, yes, let's take that project that's going to stress us all out because it's going to make a lot of money. I should have probably led toward projects that were better for the company overall.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense, and it is a very big challenge. And I grew up in a very similar way in certain regards to you. I worked since I was 14, 13 in my Aunt Lorraine's hair salon, and then I had all these like odd jobs, and I was financially driven, but my first job was on Wall Street, and I hated it, and that's when I pivoted because I said, I really want to work in a place where I feel fulfilled, and it is a hard line being successful and being happy. And is there a delineation? Do you see a delineation? Is it possible to have it all, especially as a wife, as a mother, as
Yeah.
a
I mean,
entrepreneur?
I'm incredibly happy. I look at my life and I have to pinch myself sometimes. I live in Boulder, Colorado. I'm literally looking out at the foothills as we're talking. My girls are healthy. Becoming a mom was not an easy journey for me. So to have two healthy girls, like what more could you ask for? I'm in a very good relationship, and as a child of divorce, to have
Yep.
a marriage where you feel like an equal partner and you can talk to each other about anything, it's that's amazing to me. So I feel very happy, and yet I work really hard and I love what I do. So yeah, I'm kind of living the dream.
I love that. I love that. And you have a husband who makes chocolate. I have a husband who eats chocolate. So we have that going for us.
Perfect.
I'm more of a vanilla girl, but I do love chocolate if it's like good
Well,
chocolate.
and
That's
these
so
are functional chocolate. So this is like chocolate with energy, chocolate with calm, chocolate with sleep, chocolate with
oh,
probiotics. So yeah, not something you're gonna like have 10 of in a sitting, but
okay.
functional.
Well, that's very bolder of you as well. And I need to come visit you. I've been on lockdown for quite some time, but
Yes.
right before the pandemic hit, I went to Boulder. Absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, it's
Love
awesome.
that environment. Love the culture and the startups and everything that happens there. Just very artsy and beautiful. And so, yeah, so I'm going to have to make a visit to see you when I go.
Definitely.
And you, I would consider as one of my mentors in my journey.
That's sweet.
You have been such a great friend. You have been such a good ear to listen and provided me guidance and inspiration. So I'm going to ask you, looking into your life, who were your top three mentors and what did they teach you and why?
So the first is probably the owner of that hardware store. His name is Howard Paris. Um, and it not necessarily in a positive. First of all, as a human, he just was amazing. And for a kid who did not have an easy time growing up, he became such a father figure for me and someone that I could tune into and just like a litmus test. Like, is this should I be doing this or this? And because I started working so early and that was such a positive experience for me, work became my happy place. Like up until I had kids, really, that was what I did. I worked on the weekends. I worked, my friends would say, you guys are both running successful companies. Why aren't you traveling? And well, but we have work. And I'm lucky that I am in a marriage with somebody who also enjoys working. Like our date nights, we like throw up the laptop and put on a movie. That's like fun for us.
I love
Um,
it.
but so Howard also had some health issues, and that really taught me that not to get into a situation. I think maybe that's why I gravitated toward B2B, because he was consumer products and it was running a retail store was super stressful for him. So I think that was my first lesson. Um, my next mentor is a gentleman named Tim Barrows. I worked in VC between college and business school. And here's the guy who's the managing partner of one of the top VCs or the largest VCs in Boston. And he is nice and empathetic. And he could literally, I would have 3 meetings set up for him in 3 different conference rooms, and he would jump from one to the next, and he could just
Wow.
switch on a dial. Like first was a board meeting for one of his portfolio companies, then he was meeting with one of his investors, then he was interviewing someone to work on the team. Like it was amazing to me how he could just like switch.
Multitask.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I would say my third mentor is probably my husband.
Oh,
So an entrepreneur, but also someone who finance is not my strong suit. Like as I'm raising money for Spark, I'm like, oh right, this is why I barely eked out of that finance class in business school. And his brain just works incredibly well on the finance side of things. But then he also can, if I'm having a stressful weekend or stressful week, it sometimes will run into my weekend. And he
mm.
has this ability to just be like, all right, it's time to be dad. Like now I'm dad. Now everything's great. So I really look to him for that sort of like emotional support. And we'll get into conversations. I've always made more money. And yet, I don't think I would be as successful as I am if he weren't there supporting the crazy, so to speak. Like, I need to vent to him, and then he needs to sort of show me the other side of what might be going on, which has been invaluable.
I love that so much, and I feel very relatable to that whole conversation and to the way that your marriage complements each other and your partnership complements each other. Jay and I are very similar people. He jokes he has the emotional capacity of a gnat, which he doesn't. Kind of, but but I'm very passionate and emotional, and yet financially in different ways. But you ebb and flow, and you form this
Yeah.
perfect relationship. And I think that same thing is true also in your business world as well. You find people on your team that, have skills that you don't have and that
Right.
you can kind of lean on and depend on. So when you look at resources to help you succeed, as a leader, as an entrepreneur, what are the resources that you leverage? Are there certain podcasts or books or things that
Yeah.
you really think are very helpful in your journey?
Yeah, it's interesting. During COVID, I sort of went on this reading and listening to book kick
Oh,
because
yes.
I just really felt, listen, everyone was unhappy, right? But I also come from a family where you stew in it. And like
Mm,
people in my family don't talk to each other because of something that happened 20 years ago that people don't even remember. And
wow.
and for me, like it becomes this innate part of your being. Like we're all sort of living our ancestors' experience.
Right.
And I had to break that. Like people were so unhappy during COVID, and I for years have been trying to shake the familial unhappiness and just sort of like stop and look at where you are,
Right.
stop and look where you are in your life, stop and look at all the great things you have. I started using a Panda planner about 2 years ago. It's literally a journal where you put your schedule, like you put your schedule and the projects you're working on. But before you do anything, you have to list 3 things you're grateful for and 3 things you're excited about. And I think mentally for me, that was a big turning point where I was like, wow, look at all these things week after week, day after day that I have to be thankful for and excited about. And then, really, during the pandemic, when everybody was feeling some level of depression, there was this need to go find things that just made me think differently. So there are a list of books. Reboot was a big one for me by Jerry Colonna, and like I'm not saving lives here. Like I'm a CEO and I need to make sure that all my people are happy and have jobs and our clients are happy. But if I need to take a mental health day, no one's going to die. Um,
Right.
and then another book that I've been reading, Untethered Soul, is more philosophical about like why why spend the time to be unhappy about things when you can just change your mind. It's not going to
Oh,
happen overnight. If there are true depression issues and chemical imbalances, then you have to get that figured out. But things like meditation and working out, like if I don't work out, I'm a totally different person. I now get up, my kids wake up at 7 a.m. I now get up at 6 a.m. on the weekends and go work out. Because when I was just waking up with them and didn't have time to myself, I'm not like running up a mountain every day, but it might just be a bar method class or it might just be a yoga class. But it's my time for me to get centered and feel like I had that moment. And there are a list of other books. I actually went through about 10 books in 6 months, so I'll send you the list of those.
okay, wonderful. And I'm so aligned to what you said about exercise as well. And being it's Mental Health Awareness Month, I think it's such a critical
Yeah.
topic. We lived through, many of us didn't, but we got survived a global pandemic. Many of us have lost people or know people that have lost people. Very challenging time. And um I come from a family that's a little different than yours. We have these like passionate, explosive conversations, debates, and then we kind of go back and forget like it ever happened minutes later. And that's literally something that Jay and I had to like, get through as a family is that like I need to work on my family, like ancestry, genetics, and his as well. But the one thing that we settled on during the pandemic is we actually got closer as a
Yeah,
family. And I know
same.
you did as well.
Yeah.
And that's something that's so powerful because we were I don't want to say the word trapped because that's the wrong word, but we were in a home, just the four of us, trying to work full-time jobs and homeschool and all the stress of that. No travel, no breaks, no sports, no gym or hockey or anything that we would typically do. I also channeled my energy towards different hobbies for fitness because I'm a huge believer in in mental health breaks with exercise. And
Yeah.
so I started running. I bought a Peloton. Jay started cycling. We started riding bikes as a family. So we did all of these external outdoor activities that really allowed us to find peace, to have
Right.
alone time and together time. But I find, and it's proven, that you're more successful and more productive and you sleep better, all the positives. You have better endorphins, you're
Yeah.
happier, you're healthier when you're fit and exercising. So that was important for me with the children too, because as little children, you're not used to what's going on. You're wearing a mask. They sanitize everywhere they go now.
Right.
It's incredible the level of what they're picking up. And we said it was a quarter of Callie's life that she was locked in a
Yeah.
global pandemic quarantine. So when we went through all of those pros and cons, that was very helpful. But the one thing that I did treasure, and you said this once, that you and your husband would travel so much and sometimes have dinner in an airport, right?
Yeah.
And similarly, we would both travel a lot, Jay more than I would. But that was the first year we had dinner together every night as a family. And so I was trying to find the rainbows through the rain. And
Right.
there were things that I would start. So I love your idea of gratitude and daily recognition and affirmations of like what gives you joy and happiness and what's sparking that joy, if you want to Marie Kondo it. But
Right.
I love that so much. And so now with you and your husband traveling, are you starting to travel again? Are
So
you?
yeah, he's been on a plane. His parents are actually moving here to Boulder. That's another positive that came out of it. We love his parents. They're Bubby and Grandpa, and my kids could not be more excited. So I'm literally getting off the phone with you and going to the airport to pick them up. Them moving here, he had to go on a plane to get them squared away and help them pack. I'm getting on a plane in 2 weeks. We're starting, but we've also learned that we don't have to. Like, we don't have to jump on a plane. And my first trip is a personal trip. I want to go. I have a 94-year-old grandmother that I haven't seen in a year and 4 months. So I think we're realizing that family is more important than ever, and that we don't have to jump on a plane for every little client meeting.
Absolutely. And where does your grandma live? Where's that
She's in
first trip
Boston.
from?
I'm from Massachusetts originally, so that's my
Great.
that's my old stomping grounds. I start dropping my ass as soon as I get off the plane.
Get out of the car, go real far to see grandma.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so my next question for you, Heather, is you're an entrepreneur and there's a lot of myths about entrepreneur. Is there any myth that you want to debunk for the audience listening about what it really is like to be an entrepreneur?
Different levels of entrepreneurship, right? When I first started out, I could take a day if I wanted to, whenever I wanted to. So people feel like, oh, I'm going to be an entrepreneur so that I can make my own schedule. But then once you've built a multi-million dollar company with 20 employees and a second company with 5 employees, like, there is no day off. There is no, when I'm with my kids, I'm with my kids. But it's not like I'm working, 35 to 40 hours a week. I'm working 60 to 70 hours a week because every moment that I'm not with my kids, I am working.
So, how do you find work life balance or work life integration? I
I
like to
think
call it.
integration is the key. And that's, if I haven't had a chance to exercise that day and I realize that one of my meetings is internal, I'm going to do it while I'm on a walk. I'm going to do it while I'm on a hike. If I need to, my husband totally understands if our date night is me working on a presentation that I'm supposed to give the next week. So I think it's really about making it both things. It's also about getting up really early. And this is something that I've done since college. Like, I was that kid that set my alarm and really pissed off my roommate at 5 a.m. so that I could go work out, so that it was done, so that was my day. So I get up between 4:45 and 5:15 most days. And, the weekends I let myself sleep till 6. But
Wow.
yeah, but I also go to bed early. Like, you and I have had conversations where it's 8 o'clock my time and it's 10 o'clock your time. And by 9 my time, I'm like, all right, I got to go to bed. I don't know why you're still awake at 11.
I'm the polar opposite. I'm a nocturnal person. And I find, and it's whatever, the way your brain works. I joke, Jay is also a nocturnal person, but we get up early, but I burn the candle at both ends, right?
Right.
Because I find that I do my best thinking at night, and when Jay is asleep and the kids are asleep. And I mean, similarly to you, it's that way in the morning. But for me,
Right.
that's when I really shine in my, what do I want to accomplish? What are my goals? What am I strategizing? And I just tend to think better at night. So that's, I selfishly do that. And either way, I think we're both tired.
Right. Right. Well, I don't know a mom who isn't tired. Like there's just, I think the thing that isn't totally registering for people as far as the pandemic was concerned is someone would say, "Oh, it's fine. Your kid can walk in. That's okay." And my 5-year-old would walk in and then she'd be talking to me while I'm on this call. She doesn't know to not have that
Right.
whatever conversation. And I would have to mute the call and ask her to go, play with her sister or do something. It was super distracting. And every time you get distracted, it takes you 20 minutes for your brain to get back into what you were just doing. So I think for a lot of parents, not just moms, I think for a lot of parents, it was the inability to focus on any one thing for a certain amount of time. Like you'd go from call to call to call to being with your kids to trying to get your kids set up with, their schooling. Luckily,
Right.
we have a nanny, and then my kids ended up going to preschool as things opened up a little bit. But there's this element of stress and worry. Like, yeah, my kids are in preschool. I'm worried they're going to get COVID. I'm worried that they're not wearing their masks. I'm worried that they're not washing their hands enough. So this level of stress that has fallen on parents, that it maybe, even people would say to me, "Oh, you're so lucky you have a nanny." Right. But I can totally hear everything that's going on downstairs. And when the 3-year-old gets hurt,
Right.
I'm just sitting here like doing work. No, of course, I'm thinking about what's going on there. So I think that's been a mental
Right.
health issue that we're just, people without kids are like, what do you care? You can work fewer hours than I do, and you can, deal with your
Is
kids
that a
while you're
thing? I
there.
didn't
Nobody
have
cares. Let me see your kid. Let me say hi. Like
that.
it's gotten to a point. And people without kids, like I felt awful for people on my team who didn't have anyone in
Alone.
their bubble. They were totally
Yeah.
alone. It was awful. So I think we need to
Yeah.
give everybody an air hug because I'm still not hugging yet.
Yeah.
But this has been quite the year.
Yeah, no, and we all need grace, right? Like, I mean, I talked to so many people, and just depending on where they were, I talked to a gentleman, and his parents were together 50 years, and his dad started getting onstart of Alzheimer's, so they put him in an assisted living, and the pandemic happened, and for the first time in 50 years, his parents couldn't see each other for over a year. They weren't allowed. She wasn't allowed in. He wasn't
Yeah.
allowed out. Just heartbreaking situations that people had to live through, and you never know what someone's going through. That's my rule of thumb. Like when I get cut off on the highway and somebody's rushing somewhere, I think to myself, I hope they have somewhere really important they need to be, and I hope they get there safely, because clearly something's going on.
Right.
Like clearly, I don't know what this person's going through, or
Right.
and I think the fault, maybe prior to this or even during it, is that there's frustration and anger and hurt and sadness and worry and anxiety, all those feelings. But it's so important, especially as you lead a team, to give them grace and to
Yeah.
understand your customers, your partners. What are they going through? And are you okay? No, really, are you okay? Can I
Right.
help you? Do you need anything? What can I do? Let's be there for each other and support each other. And that's what I love so much about the technology channel community and the events. And you talk about the air hugs. When I go to an event, I feel like it's a family reunion,
Yeah.
truly. Like the people that I've met in the almost 2 decades I've worked in the technology channel have become like my family. They're extensions of, they've come to our
It's
wedding, and
true. Yeah.
they celebrate with our children, and we see each other every day on Facebook. And so I think you and I share that care and concern for and empathy for others, and in terms of our community in the tech channel. And I would be remiss not to bring up the fact that 1 in 4 women left the tech channel, according to McKinsey, which was a staggering statistic during the pandemic. And you and I are very passionate about women and diversity and equality and equity and inclusion in the channel. Why are you so passionate about these subjects, Heather?
I mean, I think it's it's partially growing up around strong women or women who were sort of forced to be on their own. My mom was a single mom for years. Um,
Mind.
I think it's being in working in a hardware store and having someone assume simply because I was a woman that I didn't know what was going on. And I think that was really hard for me. And as a kid, to my benefit, I spent the last 3 years getting rid of the anger, but to my benefit, when I got angry, I pushed harder. I will
Mhm.
never forget 6 months into Channel Maven, I had started blogging. That's really how I started Channel Maven. I started blogging and posting it on LinkedIn. And a well-known consultant at the time, he has since sort of fallen off the map, called me and said, "You're just looking for a job. You don't really want to start a company, right?" Meanwhile, I'm fourth generation entrepreneur. And at 6 years old, when somebody asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said the boss. Like I was
Love
always going to be an entrepreneur. Um, he said, "You're just trying to find a job. Let me help you find a job. You don't really want to be a consultant." Meanwhile, my company has probably eclipsed his company 3 times over. And I have 20 people who have jobs because I didn't listen to him. And we sold our house and moved into a dump of an apartment. And my husband's 6'5" and literally would have to like turn sideways to wash his face in the sink because the space was so narrow between the shower and the wall. I mean,
I
it
grew up in Brooklyn. That's completely normal.
yeah, totally, totally. It's still standing. I can't believe it. I drive by it whenever I'm back in Boston, but it leaned so far over this hill that you could put a marble at one end of the apartment and it would roll to the. And I was 31. Like this was not nothing. It's not like I was 22 and could just. We were 31. We put off starting. I had my first kiddo, healthy kiddo, when I was 38. Like this was our life and sacrifice. And it's what you do when you're focused on making something that works.
I love that. I love that so much. I love the dedication, the way you have experienced those hardships, but you appreciate it that much more when you're successful because you've gone through it and you know what it's like to live in a crooked apartment. I do too.
Well, it's so funny because now people know me. I show up at shows and not to toot my own horn, but I'm like well dressed and people see the image that they know my story simply by I got laid off. We had $2,000 in the bank. And I looked at my husband who had just quit his job to start his
Wow.
own company and said, "I'm not going to interview. I'm going to start a company." And he was like, "Well, let's call that realtor and put the house on the market because we've got no money." And that was a lot of my life and growing up too. Just like if I wanted to go somewhere or do something, I had to work more hours at the hardware store and make it work. And I think there's people glamorize entrepreneurship like it's this amazing thing and super lucrative. And we moved to Boulder into, again, a crappy apartment, but it was nicer because it was in Boulder. So we could like get out of the apartment and go for a hike. But it's watching people build something, I think is part of that joy and the journey. And I learned to not just enjoy the top of the mountain when I got there, but I also learned to enjoy the journey to get there.
I love that. I love that. It's all about the journey, not the destination. And your destination may change, right? And you've seen that in your own path. You had this mission and vision, and you get there, and then you see, oh well, there's another hill I want to climb.
Right. Right.
So
And
here
it's like
you
our
are.
kids too. Like someone will say, "Well, what about Channel Maven?" I'm like, "I have 2 kids. I don't love one of them more than the other." Like, I feel like I certainly am not going to start a third company anytime soon. But, I feel like, Channel Maven's in her teenagerhood and there's an amazing executive team running the show. I certainly am still involved at a high level. And when I'm speaking at events, I'm speaking as both of the companies really do work well together. So I don't suggest starting two companies to anybody, but it's what I do.
It's what you do. So what's next? What's next for Miss Heather Margolis? Miss
Um, Spark is super exciting right now. We're getting a ton of traction. And our strategic partnerships right now are amazing. So I'm really focused on building these strategic partnerships and working with people I love. I cannot wait to get back on the road and go to these events. And that really feeds me and drives me. I love speaking. As my husband would say, I'm a total ham. Like whether it's a webinar like this, a podcast like this, or getting up on stage, I really do love it. So more of that and enjoying the summer. Like summer in Boulder is, people are like, are you going away for the summer? I'm like, why would I ever leave? People come here. Like I have to navigate through all the tourists that are in downtown Boulder right now. And our offices are right downtown. Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to find you, how can they contact you?
Yeah, the best way is LinkedIn. So I'm just Heather K. Margolis on LinkedIn. And otherwise, email heather@sparkyourchannel.com.
Awesome. And final buzz round question. If you can jump into my shoes and ask yourself anything I missed, what would you ask yourself?
Oh man, that is a hard one. I've been asked what's one thing people wouldn't know about you a lot. And I always say that I'm a total like gearhead and love working on cars. I grew up with a lift in the garage. I feel like everyone knows that factoid now. So I'm going to have to think of a different one, but that's it for now.
What do you drive? What's your car then?
Right now I have a mommy mobile. So I have the Audi Q7. But when my first car ever was a 1984 Audi 5000, it was stick shift. I didn't get a manual transmission until I had kids. But I would love when they're a little bit older to get something in a stick shift again. Like I just miss really driving.
I love that. I love that. So I did things backwards as well. So I had sort of a sedan mom car. We hit a deer when I was 9 months pregnant. Jay hit a deer. It was so sad. I cried for the deer. I was emotional and pregnant.
I've been there.
And what am I going to do? What car do I? And I thought I had this car for a long time. And if I'm going to be trapped in a car for a long time, I really want a convertible. So I got a BMW convertible, which was the anti-mom car, but I stick them in there and they like the wind in their hair.
Yeah. My dad and I rebuilt, he has a 72 Porsche and we spent a lot of time rebuilding that. So lots of convertible time in high school and lots of sunburns. So I anti-convertible and my husband is follically challenged, let's say.
Oh.
So you never want a bald man in a convertible. It's not good.
We'll get him a giant sombrero.
There we go.
Sure to borrow from Tony Francisco.
There you go.
Well, Heather, it was an absolute pleasure getting to hear more about you and your story and your journey. Thank you for inspiring us and
Thanks
our
for
audience.
having me.
We look forward to talking to Heather. You're going to love the conversation. Check out Channel Maven and Spark Your Channel and my dear friend Heather. And for everyone out there, fail forward and live. Take care.